everybody, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to another episode of Ask an Archaeologist, my series where I interview my friends and colleagues about their lives and careers working as archaeologists across the globe. Today's guest is my very good friend, Dr. Stephanie Boonstra, who is an actual Egyptologist, which is somebody that is an archaeologist but specializing in the study of ancient Egypt. Stephanie and I actually met over a decade ago in our first semester of study at Wilfrid Laurier University. We were both doing degrees in Near Eastern archaeology. As a part of that, we had to take our Hebrew class, which I've talked about in previous videos, which will be linked down below if you're interested. And we were part of a group of students that all kind of bonded over having to study for our many tests and very stressful exams for this course. At that point, we just all discovered that we were just like each other's people, and our friendship has continued from there. We both attended the Khirbet Al Mudanya Field School offered by Laurier in Jordan. She went twice in 2010 and 2012. In 2010, she was actually one of the 3 friends that I ended up touring Israel and Egypt with, which I've talked about again in videos down below if you'd like to watch. And once we finished school, we kept following a bit of a parallel path in that we both ended up moving to the UK in the same year to pursue master's courses. Mine was at Edinburgh for a master's in human osteoarchaeology. Hers was at University College London, also known as UCL, for an MA in Egyptian archaeology. She then completed that MA and went on to pursue and get a PhD from the University of Birmingham in Egyptology. We'll talk a little bit today about what her thesis was on for her degree, so we'll get into that more detail about that later. Since finishing her PhD, she has gone on to get a job as the collections manager for the Egyptian Exploration Society, which is based in London, as well as being the managing editor for the Journal of Egyptian Archaeology. Just before we get started, if you're interested in supporting my channel, please consider either subscribing or sitting through, not clicking the single ad that will be halfway through this video. Okay, let's dig in. Thank you so much for being on my channel, Stephanie, and welcome to Ask an Archaeologist, my series where I talk to my archaeological friends about their careers.
Thank you for having me.
Exciting to be able to interview someone who is not only my personal friend, but also somebody who's managed to become like a verified Egyptologist with a PhD and everything, which is really exciting. We're going to get to that later, but we're just going to start off at the beginning. So the first question is, what inspired you to study archaeology?
Basically, as a kid, I always loved learning about ancient history. Any book that had anything to do with ancient history, I wanted to read. I loved any kind of film or media about ancient history, watched all the documentaries on TV. This might sound silly, but the mummy films were a big love of mine, those Brendan Fraser films, the first 2 only, let's be honest. Yeah. But watching those movies, I would always want to then look up details about what these ancient things and places were, and basically watching that, I was like, I need to go to those places. I think I have been to all of them now. Stuff like that, I just absolutely loved ancient history. And so when I was trying to decide what to take in university, I thought, I really want to do something with ancient history, but I don't want to sit in an office and just read ancient texts. Like, I want to be there. And so then I thought, oh, archaeology, that way I can actually be there when these new discoveries are being made that then shape what we think of ancient history and these ancient people.
Yeah, I mean, the Mummy movie is also very seminal for me. So you started off studying Near Eastern archaeology at Laurier with me, and then we actually both happened to move to the UK in the same year to pursue our masters. So tell me a little bit more about deciding on your masters and then your PhD programs.
It was kind of finishing up the undergrad in Canada when I thought that I wanted to focus on Egyptology, and that was because I wrote my kind of undergraduate thesis on Middle Kingdom Egyptian tombs. And I was like, I really am passionate about this, but I always thought, oh, there's no jobs in Egyptology. I mean, there's no jobs in any of these fields. So I thought it wasn't practical. Yeah. But when I really thought about it, pursuing a subject like this, no, of course it's not practical, but you do it because you're passionate about it. And I knew that I was most passionate about Egyptology. So I wanted to then only apply to kind of Egyptology programs. As we know, there's very little in Canada. There are some in the States too. I did apply to Toronto, but I really had always wanted to be in Europe. I wanted to where all of these different powerhouses of Egyptology are coming together, and London was the kind of logical place. I did apply to some other programs, but the possibility of being in London, right next to the British Museum, have the Petrie Museum there that I got to work with and volunteer there during my master's, it was just kind of a no-brainer. And I always wanted to kind of live abroad. I thought I'd only live abroad for a year, but it's been 7 and a bit years now.
Yeah. So how did you then go from your master's into your PhD? And like, what was your thesis? Why did you pick Birmingham?
Networking. The whole thing is networking in Egyptology. It's a small field, but you have to know people, and people let you know about different opportunities. While I was working on my master's dissertation still, I heard about a PhD opportunity up at the University of Birmingham. And basically it was a fully funded PhD working with a collection of ancient Egyptian artifacts that were on loan from Eton College to the University of Birmingham. And so this PhD basically said you work as the postgraduate curator of this collection, so you get lots of museum skills, you put together an exhibition, do some publications, and then you do a PhD on that topic as well. So I applied, I got it, and then I moved up to Birmingham. I did find quite shortly after starting there that the collection, because it's a private collection, so pretty much none of the objects have provenance. It was very hard to write a PhD on. So I ended up going back to my kind of passion, my love in Egyptology, and wrote my PhD on that, and that is scarab amulets. Fell in love with scarab amulets during my master's. I wrote my master's dissertation on scarab amulets that were So scarab amulets are a very typically ancient Egyptian artifact, carved to look like a scarab beetle with hieroglyphs on the base. But for one small period of time, the southern Levant, so that's kind of southern Palestine, modern Israel, so they were creating their own imitations of these very Egyptian artifacts based on what they had seen through trade. So I wrote my master's dissertation on a assemblage of these scarab amulets at a site called Tel El Ashul, which is in the modern Gaza Strip. I loved it so much. And one of the things I noticed during my master's dissertation was that nobody's written a kind of typology or publication on 18th dynasty or New Kingdom scarabs. A lot of people have written on Middle Kingdom ones, as well as Second Intermediate Period, which was the period that my master's dissertation was on. But nobody had really gone that chronological step further. And I think it was one of the lecturers at UCL said, well, why don't you do that as a PhD? And so that was my dream PhD. Yeah. Then I thought I was going to write a PhD on this collection, but that didn't work out. So I did go back and I was still able to be the curator and had a funded PhD, which was great. But I then got to write my dream topic PhDs on the early 18th dynasty Arabs in Egypt. There are a lot of 18th dynasty scarabs. So I had to whittle down the parameters a bit, but yeah, absolutely loved it.
That's so cool. I don't think I ever knew that was specifically what your topic was about before. Because I know that there's quite a difference between the Canadian and the American and the UK systems. How long did your PhD take you to do?
PhDs in the UK are usually at least 3 years. So usually kind of 3 to 4 years if you just do that. But I know very few people who have been able to just do a PhD and not done things on the side, like what I did with the collection, but I also taught undergrad courses. Towards the end of my PhD, I also was offered an amazing job as the Egyptology curator at the Leicester Museum, so the museum on Newark in Leicester, to completely redevelop and redesign and curate their Egyptology galleries. So obviously I couldn't turn down an amazing opportunity. My PhD did take longer than I thought it would. Let's see, how long did it take altogether? I started in the autumn of 2014, and then I graduated in end of 2019. So I guess 5 years. But I mean, the kind of jobs that I held throughout it made the transition to life after a PhD so much easier, because you don't gain that experience during your PhD. You're starting way behind everybody else when it comes to being on the job market.
That experience is really valuable. Even in commercial archaeology, it's really the same. I've always found that when I was starting out in Canada and the UK, my field experience in Jordan that I had was really valuable because I actually had field experience. So I imagine it's much the same for you. Tell us a little bit more about what you're focusing on now.
My job now is quite varied. So it's not a like traditional academia job. So I work for an organization called the Egypt Exploration Society, and it is the leading UK organization that researches in Egypt and has a permanent base in Egypt as well. So we have an office in Cairo, but our main office is here in London. When I was hired, I initially was hired 3 days a week, which was when I was finishing my PhD. So there's a lot of overlap with all these things. The position then was as collections manager. So the collections that are kind of under my purview are our archive, and we have an archive of roughly 1 million items. I say roughly because we will never know exactly. And this archive is the archaeological archive from the Egypt Exploration Society's excavations that go back to our founding in 1882. So it's nearly 140 years of history in our archive. And this archive, it's so fascinating. You can learn a lot about not only the amazing sites, but also the people that worked there, both the British archaeologists as well as the Egyptian archaeologists. Unfortunately, they're less represented in the archive because it's a very colonial Western archive at times, but start to unpack a lot of these stories and a lot about the political history in Egypt. I also am in charge of our library, and we probably have the largest specialist Egyptology library outside of the British Museum or UCL, or Oxford is better as well. But yeah, we have our libraries open for more members of the public than just kind of university students and things. We also have a very large papyri collection. So we have 500,000 fragments of Oxyrhynchus in Middle Egypt. And these were all excavated in the 1890s and early 1900s by the EES. And all of these papyri fragments, they were brought back to Oxford because the archaeologists that were excavating on behalf of the EES were from Oxford. So they brought them back to their office so that they could read them and publish them from their university offices. And they've stayed there ever since. So over time, we've had different papyrologists come and go, and they work on the papyri and they publish them as well. But it's obviously, it's a massive collection. So as many hands on deck are beneficial. We also have a really cool cartonnage collection in Oxford that we're only just starting to really work with, and some of the pieces are in the process of being conserved. The other part of my job is I'm the managing editor of the Journal of Egyptian Archaeology, which is one of the top Egyptology journals in the world. Through that job, a lot of it is liaising with authors and peer reviewers, a lot of copy editing, which can get tedious, of course, proofreading, but it's a way that I get to read groundbreaking research in Egyptology. I could get to read a lot of these new discoveries and new findings before anybody else gets to see them.
So you have like so many different elements to your job. Like, what does like a day-to-day look like for you, if you even have one?
Probably, especially pandemic, it's get up, go make myself a cup of coffee, drink that coffee while reading email. There's so many emails. So a lot of it is answering emails, and many of the emails are either about researchers who have questions about our collections and want to kind of work with them or publish them in a new book or something. So there's a lot of back and forth with that. Also liaising with authors and peer reviewers for the journal. So it's a lot of emails. Every once in a while, I get a little bit of quiet where I can work on copy editing an article or putting together a proposal. We're always thinking about the next thing that we can do to engage people with the archive, especially, and do our kind of own research in the archive as well. We also run a lot of events.
Yeah. Well, especially with COVID, you guys have had like a really active Zoom lecture series.
Basically, at the start of lockdown, we thought, oh, well, we were hoping to run kind of regular lectures from our office in London. And we had always done that. But we thought, oh, well, we've got some of these lectures to hand. My boss, director, Carl Graves, and I thought, okay, well, maybe we could give some of these lectures online, see if people are interested. And people were interested. And it ended up now we're coming up to, I guess we're about 10 months now of running regular online lectures and events, and we've been doing online courses as well. Most of the lectures are completely free. All you have to do is register on our website. The online courses do cost a small fee. It's a really good way for people to hear about new research, but it also breaks down the kind of geographical restrictions that Egyptology events have usually had. Usually it's North America, Europe, and then Australasia. And it often does cut out places like Egypt, for example. But now we have a completely global attendance, and we have a global speakers list. So we have someone giving a talk from Barbados in March. So it's so great that we can kind of make Egyptology more of a global community rather than have restrictions.
Yeah, it makes it a bit more diverse in terms of like who's able to attend. You know, it's not dependent on I need to be able to afford to go as well as stay there if I'm not living in that location.
Well, especially one of the major issues before was Egyptians weren't able to attend a lot of the conferences and talks. And there have been cases in the recent past of Egyptians who were supposed to give keynote lectures or lectures at conferences in the UK and being denied a visa to talk about their own cultural heritage, which is so, embarrassing, upsetting. And now more than ever, we should all be trying to welcome Egyptians into what we're doing. They should be at the forefront. They should be leading a lot of the research that is happening in Egyptology now, and they absolutely should not be excluded. So of course there are issues with internet connections. We've had an amazing global engagement with it, so that's been great.
Yeah, I imagine it's something now that you're probably going to be continuing even post-pandemic.
When kind of it's safe to go back to the office and things, our new normal will be quite different to how we operated in the past. We've realized that working from home can be very, very productive, can be better for engagement. People don't need to be in the same room to collaborate and things like that. So we'll definitely continue the online lectures and courses.
Oh, excellent. Well, if anybody is interested in attending any of those, the links are going to these lectures and workshops and stuff are definitely going to be in the description box below. So feel free to check them out. Next question, you've been I'm so jealous of this fact is that you've been able to go and do field work in Egypt, which is like the be all end all. I remember hearing about like in undergrad how Egypt is one of those places that can be really selective about the people that get to go on their field projects because everybody wants to dig there. So what was that experience like? Tell us a bit about the project. How did it compare to our time digging in Jordan?
It's very different. So I was very lucky to be able to excavate in Jordan for 2 summers, and both of them I got to spend with you, Rachel, which were great, but it's a completely different atmosphere than it is working in Egypt. By and large, at least in my experience, the excavation teams are much smaller in Egypt. There's often smaller projects. There are, of course, the exceptions to this. And the teams are often much more international. And so they've often been a mix of European, North American, foreign archaeologists, essentially, and Egyptian archaeologists. Yeah, much smaller team means different accommodation, things like that. Often living in the village nearby where you're excavating, which is amazing. You do get kind of a better view of what local life is like, and you get to spend more time with the locals, and it's great for picking up Arabic as well to be more integrated into the community. But even how excavations are run is different. In Jordan, I know that the excavations that we were on were field schools, and so they were kind of made specifically for
training students.
Yeah, training foreign students specifically, whereas most field schools in Egypt are about training Egyptian archaeologists. If you don't have any archaeological experience and you want to work in Egypt, probably not going to be able to. There are not really field school opportunities for foreigners. There's a couple in the Delta, but yeah, so basically you need to have some sort of experience. Ideally not excavation experience, but processing experience. So because I'd volunteered in the pottery lab back during our undergrad, drawing potsherds and things like that. And then also through networking, met a dig director, and she needed someone to draw on site. And so I was able to come with her on her excavation. I spent 3 seasons excavating with her, and I didn't draw a single thing in any of them. Not that mad about, to be honest, because we ended up doing a lot of salvage archaeology, and I spent a lot more time surveying in Egypt as well as Sudan. So I've excavated in northern Sudan as well, and that was a lot of surveying and then some excavation as well.
But you get to do excavating through your job now?
Yes and no. Unless things take a turn for the worse COVID-wise, I will be joining the Amarna team in the autumn. So working at my dream site. Excited to join Professor Barry Kemp and his team. I'm able to do that as part of my job. I have to stay on top of emails and things because they don't answer themselves. There's a way to work around it. It's not like I'm getting paid to excavate. Very few people do get excavated in Egypt. But yeah, it's similarly to how a lecturer wouldn't get a pay cut while they were on site. It's like that.
Again, talking about field work, what are your best and worst field experiences?
I feel like all my worst fieldwork experiences are weather related though. I'm a very fair weather person. Sandstorms, I don't like sandstorms. Just, gosh, they hurt your face. Yeah, I haven't experienced a sandstorm in Egypt, actually. And then also when I was excavating in Sudan, it was February. And you think, oh, Sudan, that's very south. It's hot there. And yeah, it's very hot in the days, but there's no insulation in our accommodation. The windows don't have any glass or anything. It's very, very cold at night. And it did not have enough layers. That wasn't the greatest, but I've loved every excavation I've been on. I think 6 or 7 seasons of excavating across these 3 countries now, and I've loved them all really. So I don't really have a single bad experience. I just the weather to be perfect all the time.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. I think most archaeologists would agree with you, and yeah. Quite a few of my like top 10 or like top 5 worst experiences are 100% related to the weather. Leading on from that, what is your favorite thing that you've ever discovered?
Ooh, yes, I did have a think about this, and I think the favorite object I ever found, it was probably 1 week into my first excavation in Egypt. And I was at the site of Marimda Beni Salama, which is a really famous Neolithic site in the Nile Delta. And we were digging test trenches because the government was putting in a pipeline. Needed to check that any archaeological finds in these test trenches were recorded and removed. So, yeah, it was really early on, and I was excavating, and I saw this little glint. I was like, "Oh, what's that?" And I looked, and it was a mother of pearl shell pendant for a necklace. And it was absolutely stunning, and it was so pretty. And I was like, this can't be ancient because the site is like 7,000 years old. I was like, is this really that old? And found out, yes, it is a genuine Neolithic shell pendant. My excitement was dampened a little bit because like half an hour later, one of my colleagues, Amyasine, found another one like just too, and then we didn't find anything else like that for the rest of the season.
I'm sure there's a lot of people watching this who are like really inspired, but for people who are maybe a bit more on the fence or who aren't quite sure what they want to do, what would you say to like inspire or encourage other people to follow in your footsteps?
I don't want to be negative, but you're not sure if you want to do Egyptology, then don't do Egyptology. I mean, sure, if you want to do it as an undergrad course because you just want an undergrad, but you don't plan on taking it any further, then great, like recommend it. It's fascinating. But if you think, oh, maybe I'll go for a career in Egyptology, it's very, very hard. There are very, very few jobs. It's you do make it through to a PhD and then get a postdoc. Postdocs are incredibly competitive, and you get bounced around different countries and universities and don't really have a home for decades sometimes. If none of that dissuades you and you're like, no, I'm passionate about Egypt, I love Egyptology, then if I could only give one piece of advice, it's jump on opportunities. You're at your university, there's a collection, artifacts. See if you can volunteer there. Ask to volunteer. Don't wait until they put up a sign for volunteering. Ask someone, because there might be something that you can do. And just kind of jump on as many opportunities as you can throughout your academic career, because you never know what of those experiences will be the one thing that gets you a job over someone else. And it's funny, when I describe my career trajectory to someone, my explanation was so long. It's because every little volunteering experience I've had, every job, whether part-time or not, has led me to have the skills and experience that I needed to get my current job and things like that.
Excellent answer, I think. And also very typical of a lot of archaeologists that I interview is like, if you don't love it, it's probably not for you. Which,
oh no,
like, you don't want to crush anyone's dreams, but it is something that you have to sustain a certain passion for to be able to put up with some of the pitfalls that come along with it. In that vein, how did you manage to get your position at the EES?
Well, basically from a lot of different volunteering and different jobs. A big reason why I wanted to do my master's at UCL was because I really wanted to volunteer in the Petrie Museum. So while I was still in Canada, I was emailing the staff at the Petrie Museum to say, I'll be there in September. Can I start volunteering? And they said, you're the first person who's emailed us this year? Sure. So I ended up volunteering there. I started just helping out with events, and then I ended up doing front of house. And so that was greeting people coming into the museum. And then finally I stuck around enough that the curator, Dr. Alice Stevenson, even gave me a volunteer position doing inventory of the collection. So opening all the drawers. It was wonderful. I'd love to really go back and do that volunteering again. And then because of that, I was able to then get the PhD working with the collection. And so I worked with that collection throughout. I also did undergrad teaching. I organized conferences, this, that, and the other thing. And then all that experience, specifically the stuff with the museum, led to me getting the job in Leicester. And that job in Leicester, working with collections on a big scale, then led to me getting the job as the collections manager. But also when I was applying for collections manager, saying, yes, I've organized conferences, I've taught courses, including using collections and stuff, all made it so that I was the desirable candidate for that position. Every little thing you do really helps.
You said that you started off on a part-time position, but that's now transitioned to full-time?
Yeah, so it was part-time to work with the collections, and then I took on the position of the managing editor of the journal. And so that brought me up to full-time, but I've also taken on loads of other little things along the way. My job description is very lengthy now.
So we have our bonus question. A couple months ago, I did a video reviewing this Netflix documentary, Secret of the Saqqara Tomb. And I've noticed in a lot of the comments, people basically, I don't know if I want to say slagging off, but saying that in their opinion, the Egyptian team was doing things incorrectly because they were like picking stuff off the ground without gloves, or they were moving stuff around. In my personal opinion, a lot of that was stuff being redone for the cameras. But as an Egyptologist and someone who just watched the documentary in preparation for this interview, what was your take on it?
I do think that we can't take these programs at face value. They are made to be sensational and exciting, and a big takeaway is, wow, they did find a lot of amazing things in one season. And Saqqara is such a fascinating site. There is so much there. And for anyone who says, oh, why are you working in Egyptology? Haven't they found everything? Like, just watch this and you can see how much still to find. I wouldn't judge it based on a program. I wouldn't judge the archaeologists. All of the archaeologists have loads of experience. They all have the proper qualifications. They've all worked there. In my experience, the best archaeologists I've ever worked with are Egyptian. When I worked in the Nile Delta, we had a team of archaeologists from a village called Kuf, and they are multi-generational of being absolute experts in excavating. Their grandfathers and great-grandfathers all excavated on sites dating back to Flinders Petrie. And so I got to work with a lot of those elite archaeologists. They excavate a lot faster than you and I might when we're being careful, but the thing is, this is their job, that like all year round, like they know what they're doing, and they can do things so fast, and they are really, really good at what they do.
Yeah, I think one of the actual major misconceptions about archaeology is how slow everything has to be. If most people were to go on a commercial archaeology site in the UK, they would be really surprised and perhaps be saying similar comments about the way that things are handled there, which is an entirely different conversation. But there's a lot of difference between what people perceive archaeology to be and what it actually is. I thought the documentary did a really good job of trying to make things exciting, like you said, showing like a wealth of artifacts. And, you know, like the one comment that I did see was like, oh, what about this stratigraphy? And I was just looking at him. I was like, well, clearly you're not an archaeologist, because how are you supposed to have stratigraphy in a rock cut shaft? Like, there's not a bunch of different deposition events there that you need to investigate. And also from a safety perspective, how are you supposed to excavate that without it collapsing in on you?
And the thing with Egypt is you do have a lot of windblown sand. So some layers are able to just be kind of much more quickly excavated than others. But yeah, I mean, it's a Netflix documentary. Like you're never going to expect it to be completely by the book. The one thing that bothered me about the documentary is how Netflix or the director decided to use the word hunt a lot for hunting for tombs. And I was like, they're not hunting. They're using their expertise. They are scientists. They are incredibly clever. They know this site. They're not hunting. They're doing a proper scientific search. But yeah, I thought it was great that it showed the whole range of specialists that you have. I loved that almost the whole thing was in Arabic. I certainly wouldn't ever want to criticize another archaeologist's methods without maybe seeing them in person.
How do rescue operations and stuff like that work in Egypt? Because so in the UK, if someone wants to like build a housing estate, they have to put it through planning. Planning will say you need to take care of any archaeology that's going on here. They hire the archaeologist. We come in, we excavate the site. We don't excavate the entire site. We excavate a percentage of it. And then once we've satisfied the conditions of the planning, we go away, we process stuff, we give a report. I presume it's a very different system in Egypt if they're using kind of academic digs as their salvage.
Yeah, that one, it was a different kind of experience. So the land that we were doing the salvage thing on, I don't think it was registered as archaeological land. So the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, they have very strict rules about what can be done where. And so they have a lot of archaeological land, and no development would ever happen there. But this was different. So this was a Paleolithic sand terrace that had a lot of the lithic finds in situ, like just below the surface. So quite a unique spot. But because it doesn't have any kind of archaeological architecture, for example, it's not really deemed as an archaeological site. So technically, the construction company did not need to have excavations run there. But because our team had worked on that site for a number of seasons, basically said, could we do a quick salvage excavation before you bulldoze it? And they let us. And in fact, multiple times we ended up causing delays for them. They had no legal reason why they had to let us do this. They were just really nice people that clearly cared about the heritage.
All right, so that's everything. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for being on today and being such a good sport, answering all my questions and everything. It's been such a pleasure catching up with you.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
All right, guys, that's the end of the interview. I'm so happy that I was able to have Stephanie on my channel, both just to catch up as friends and to be able to tell her story to you guys. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please put them in the comment section down below, and I will do my best to answer them for you. And if I can't answer them, I'll maybe see if I can pass them on to Steph and she can answer any questions for you. If you would like to follow Stephanie, I've got her Twitter down below, as well as the links to the EES Twitter and their lecture series that we mentioned in the video in case you are interested in attending any of their lectures. My socials are below as usual if you'd like to follow me on Instagram or Twitter. If you liked this video, give us a thumbs up. If you want to see more from me and continue to support my channel, please subscribe and hit the bell notification button so that you get notified every time I put out new videos, which is about every 2 weeks. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye!